origin story with it as you want. But it usually helps to just be like, we're from Brazil.
That will sum up everything.
Yeah. Was there a comics community when you were kids?
Well, there were waves. When we were kids, in the 80s, just like before the dictatorship in Brazil ended. Yeah, during the dictatorship, because it was
how
like.
long do you want it to be?
Yeah.
No, let's sum it up.
Yeah, there's a strong comics tradition in Brazil. Cartoonist tradition in Brazil, like political cartoons and comics, because of the dictatorship. Before the dictatorship that lasted from 64 to 85, we had all this market with like lots of like horror comics and romance comics and pornographic comics and all this sort of stuff. Then the dictatorship came. All this stuff kind of went away, and then there was all this political stuff, satirical humor. That's all that survives, But when the dictatorship ended in '85, you could do whatever you wanted, and then the humor went off the border and mixed up with pornographic stuff. So we were like 10. And we would get these comics on the newsstands with people having sex and lots of dicks and tits and swearing.
I just want to see a comic called Dicks and Tits, but it's written in Portuguese.
Yeah. We should do that. But the thing is, like, it was in the middle of the 80s. There was nothing else to represent that recent freedom.
Yeah.
So comics were huge. So this basically independent cartoonists were doing self-published comics and selling 300,000 copies every month. But the main I think that's important for us. Like the main cultural storytelling form in Brazil is soap operas.
Yeah.
Everyone watches it. And in the 80s, there's no such thing as cable, there's no such thing as internet, so everyone watches soap operas. And like there's one channel everyone watches all around the country. So we grew up watching these drama stories. Serialized every day. And relationships. So that's why I think that's one of the reasons why we tell the stories that we tell.
Yeah.
And that's huge in Brazil. Huge. Soap operas in Brazil are huge. And they're not necessarily good, but you get addicted to it because it's every day a new chapter.
Yeah.
If you don't follow it, then you watch one day, you don't know what's going on, and you don't care. But if you watch it like for a week...
So it's just like the X-Men.
It's just like the X-Men.
Yeah.
By the same time we were getting these Brazilian comics, we started reading the X-Men and following what happened next.
Yeah.
And that's when we started, following comics. We were just like hooked.
Right.
And then we started reading everything. Every superhero comic book in the newsstand we would read. All in Portuguese, all translated. We didn't have the same comics. They were like all, stuffed together in anthologies stuff. So we didn't grow up with this whole Marvel and DC stuff because it was all published by the same publisher in Brazil. So they were all superhero comics. We could get access in Brazil to, there was this anthologies publishing like European comics, but that's like one anthology with several artists coming every month. Superheroes were like 20 comics coming every month.
Yeah.
So it's a bigger mass of information coming to you. So in the 80s it was superheroes in Brazil. In the 90s was manga and superheroes and alternative comics. 90s was manga because all the Brazilian publishers they were broke. We had this big economic plan that everyone went broke, so all the publishers stopped publishing original material, Brazilian material. It was all licensed stuff, so only superheroes, Disney, and comics for kids survived. So in the 90s, you have this big gap of Brazilian material, Brazilian comics. So you had to self-publish, and that's when we started making comics. And so I don't know when we started thinking of us as creative. I think we decided to do comics before we realized we were creative.
A funny thing that I think about having a brother, though, because I'm really close to my brother, but my brother does something completely different than I do for a living. I think in some ways you could say we do the same thing because we both argue for a living. But my brother is an attorney, and when we were kids, I used to try and teach him to draw. Because I was always like, from an early age, people were always like, Chasing Control pretty good. And I was interested in it, so people would like push me in that direction. And my brother's 4 years younger. And I remember like when I got really into comics, I would try to teach him to be my inker, even though I didn't know how to ink. And to this day, I'm like, I was way too hard on him. And if I had been easier on him, he probably would have like become an artist or something. He has like he has a brain for it. He just hasn't like developed it in that direction, So I'm a little jealous that like you basically were born into like having a studio, Did you pick it up at the same time?
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that helped us keep, going into comics and surviving it.
Yeah.
Because we were always interested in drawing. We were always drawing all the time. Everything that's
drawing was something that we started as babies.
Yeah.
And never stopped. Yeah, but I think because we were together as babies,
All the time.
and drawing together all the time, that created a different relationship with drawing. Drawing was like our secret weapon, our shared superpower.
Yeah.
And
Almost
like-
the language that you use to
Yeah.
communicate with one another.
and we could do it anywhere, so we were doing everywhere,
Yeah.
and it was our bubble, so it became something that was part of our relationship with each other, and we would discover, growing up, we would discover everything together.
What I find funny about you guys, you're different people, but at the same time, you also both draw, you both do comic books, you don't, so I find it funny that you both actually did do the same thing, which is rare, I feel, even in twins.
There's a couple famous basketball, the Lopez brothers are twins.
the Lopez
brothers. Tomax and Zaymot and G.I. Joe.
They both joined Cobra, and they both made G.I. Joe.
Yeah, what I think it's interesting is not that we did the same thing.
Yeah.
What I think it's a relief is that we could both do the same thing. We both succeeded on the same thing.
And also-
That would be like the
The whole thing about being twins is like,
if you fail and he doesn't.
it's like being
yeah,
different,
sure. Yeah.
Being the same is the rule. Being different, it's something you have to work on. It's like a problem, an issue. So, watching the same stuff, growing up at the same time, you go to school at the same time, you're studying the same thing, you're watching the same movies, you're reading the same comics, you
have the same friends.
You have the same friends,
Yeah, sure.
or you have, twice the friends everyone else has. Because our parties when we were kids, they were like twice as big as everyone else's party in school because we would call all the friends from two classes.
Yeah.
So if one of us gets something and the other doesn't, it's always an issue. So like when we went to college, I got into the good public school and he didn't. That the first major like split that we had in our lives, and it really helped. In like many other bad things, it expanded our universe because up to that point, we did everything together, all the time. All our friends were the same.
Yeah.
And then
You were almost at risk of being codependent.
we are codependent. We're still working on that. Yeah. We're still working on that on most things. Yeah. Our connection in terms of work and life is so big that to have a wife or a girlfriend or anyone with us, they have to understand that, look, this is it.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work for you, it's not working.
Well, there's a third level too, where like comics is everyone else's mistress.
Yeah.
You know, like.
Yeah, it's a very strong commitment, comics.
Yeah.
So luckily for us, like my wife, she's an architect, and she actually knew I was in comics before we hooked up. She liked my comics. She was like a fan, and his wife went to art school. She's into jewelry, so she respects and likes what we do, and so it wouldn't work if that didn't happen. If they didn't understand that and understand this relationship. Like Fábio is in my house, like he has the key to my house and he just walks in, like creeps me out, like
I'm like Kramer.
Kramer, he's the Kramer of my house, and and my wife has to understand that. He's always going to be there.
Yeah.
Even though we get into fights sometimes, but it's they only last for like a good night of sleep, and that's it.
Sure, of course.
So he's always going to be there.
I find like I think because of my family, because of my relationship with my brother growing up, it's made me a good collaborator, even though it didn't work out with my brother.
Well, our relationship made us worse collaborators to other people because we have this brutal honesty with each other that sounds horrible when like it's terrible. Yeah, it's terrible to say to other people when something sucks.
So wait a minute then. So you go and you tell him, like he draws a page or something like that, like, dude, what are you doing?
Yes.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
Well, because I know him. I know he can do better.
Yeah.
And I tell him to do better. I tell him
And you're
to
in
do
the
it
same studio, so
over.
that's got to be terrible.
Yeah, well, it happens every day. And but
Every day.
the good part is that intimately in our heads, we are thinking, this is not good.
Right.
But then he walks in and he says, this is not good. And that's it. So I believe every artist or creative person thinks like that.
Right.
But they don't have someone who knows you as well to come from the outside and say it. And sometimes you just like pretend you don't think like that and just goes with it. So you deliver the crappy page because your schedule is you're out of. I'm losing the words in English. Yeah. Deadline. So your deadline is blown, and but we just keep we stick with the quality. We can't not say it, so we just say it. Once it's said, you can't unsay it, and you can't forget it, and then we just erase it or start over. And you can't really have this relationship with everyone. People are not ready for this kind of commitment, and you're right, this sucks. It's not about your work, it's not about you, it's nothing personal. It's just, do you want this book to suck? Because people who see your work, they don't know if you slept bad or you were hungover, or if you was watching some movie, and then now you have like 1 hour to finish your page.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right? Or if
Nor
you're
should
playing,
they care.
yeah, they don't know it. They shouldn't know it. Shouldn't care. They will only see the final thing done, and if it sucks, it will suck. So that's what you want. See that, and you can't say, you can be dishonest, not dishonest, dishonest with a lot of creators. They're not ready for this.